At WrestleMania 32, The Undertaker walked into Hell in a Cell against someone he'd never faced before in that structure. Not a rival wrestler, but the boss's son. Shane McMahon had returned to WWE weeks earlier with a simple pitch: give him control of Monday Night Raw. Vince's answer was just as simple: beat The Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell and it's yours. It sounded like a mismatch on paper. Shane hadn't wrestled a full-time schedule in over a decade. The Undertaker was still, at that point, one of the most dominant figures in the company's history. But what happened inside? That cell became one of the most talked-about matches of the entire decade. Not because of who won, but because of what Shane was willing to do to make people believe he deserved to. This is the story of that match, the storyline stakes that made it matter, and what it actually ended up meaning for Shane McMahon's career. Let's set the stage, because none of this works without understanding exactly what was on the line. Shane McMahon returned to WWE television in February 2016, appearing on Raw after years away from the company. Framed as a returning son, challenging his father's control of the business, the storyline positioned Shane as someone tired of watching from the sidelines, publicly pushing for real authority over the flagship show. Vince, in classic McMahon fashion, wasn't going to simply hand it over. Instead, he set the terms himself. Shane would face The Undertaker at WrestleMania inside Hell in a Cell, a structure The Undertaker had built much of his legacy around. Win, and Shane would get control of Raw. Lose, and by the storyline's own implication, he'd be finished. His return would have been for nothing. That stipulation is what turned this from a random comeback match into appointment viewing. It wasn't framed as Shane wanting a title. It was framed as Shane wanting real power inside the company, with The Undertaker standing as the one obstacle nobody got past without paying a price. WWE built weeks of promos around exactly that framing, with Shane repeatedly making the case on camera that he deserved to run the show his father had built. Vince, meanwhile, played the skeptical gatekeeper, publicly doubting that his son had what it took to earn that kind of authority, which only added more tension heading into the match itself. Whatever the real backstage motivations were for putting this match together, the presentation worked. By the time WrestleMania 32 arrived, fans genuinely didn't know what to expect, and that uncertainty is rare for a match built around a semi-retired authority figure facing a legend nearly 2 decades into his career. Part of what made it land was the sheer novelty of the pairing. The Undertaker's WrestleMania opponents had for years been drawn from a pool of top in-ring performers. Shane McMahon, by contrast, was an executive with an on-again, off-again wrestling history, which made the entire build feel less like a typical Mania match and more like a genuine gamble on both sides. Now let's break down what actually happened inside that cell, because the match itself became just as memorable. As the stakes surrounding it, Shane came out swinging, almost literally, wrestling with a recklessness that felt deliberate. He wasn't trying to out-wrestle The Undertaker. He couldn't, and everyone watching knew it. Instead, he leaned into physical risk-taking early, throwing himself into strikes and positioning that had far more to do with proving something than with conventional, in-ring strategy. It read, even in the moment, like a message: I'm not here to out-wrestle you. I'm here to prove I'll do whatever it takes. At one point early in the match, Shane even used the cell structure itself as a weapon, hurling a steel chair and improvising spots that most performers his age, with his level of ring rust, simply wouldn't have attempted. The middle portion of the match belonged almost entirely to The Undertaker. He methodically dismantled Shane, working with the kind of measured dominance that has defined his career, making it clear through pure in-ring storytelling that this wasn't a contest between equals. It was a veteran reminding a challenger exactly what level he was actually operating at. Every strike, every setup, reinforced the same idea the entire match was built around: that stepping inside Hell in a Cell against The Undertaker wasn't something you could talk your way into deserving. You had to earn it physically in real time. Then came the moment everyone still talks about. Shane climbed to the top of the Hell in a Cell structure, roughly 16 feet above the ring, and leapt off, aiming to crash down onto The Undertaker through the announce table below. The Undertaker moved. Shane hit the table alone, and the impact was real enough that it briefly halted the broadcast's usual pacing while the arena processed what it had just watched. It wasn't a spot built around trickery or camera angles. It was a genuine, dangerous leap, and it instantly became the single most replayed moment from the entire match. From there, The Undertaker finished things decisively, hitting the tombstone piledriver for the win. The referee raised his hand, and by the storyline's own terms, Shane's bid for control of Raw was over. But the story didn't end when the bell rang. And this is where the real debate begins. On one hand, there's a strong case that this loss functioned as a kind of ceiling for Shane's on-screen ambitions going forward. Losing to The Undertaker, especially in a match built specifically around whether he deserved real power in the company, sent a clear internal message. Shane wasn't going to be positioned as a top authority figure with actual control moving forward. In the years since, Shane has held on-screen roles, commissioner, general manager duties, various authority appearances, but he was never again positioned as a genuine contender for company-wide control the way this match had briefly suggested he might be. Whether that was the plan all along or a direct consequence of this specific loss is genuinely debatable, but the pattern afterward is hard to ignore. On the other hand, there's an equally strong case that this match did the opposite, that it earned Shane a level of respect from fans and from the company that actually extended his on-screen shelf life rather than shortening it. Taking that jump at his age, with no ring rust excuse to hide behind, is the kind of moment that tends to buy real goodwill in professional wrestling, an industry that has always valued visible physical sacrifice. In interviews afterward, Shane spoke about the injuries that jump actually caused, treating it less like a stunt and more like something he considered necessary to sell the moment properly. The Undertaker, for his part, has spoken with genuine respect about Shane's willingness to take that risk, acknowledging the kind of guts it takes to attempt something like that at WrestleMania. It's a reasonable argument that WWE kept bringing Shane back in prominent roles for years afterward precisely because this performance proved he'd put his body on you. The line for the business, not despite it. Both readings can be true at once, honestly. Shane may have lost any realistic path toward being booked as a serious power player in the story WWE was telling, while also gaining enough real-world credibility that the company kept finding reasons to bring him back on screen in other capacities. There's a third angle worth considering too, purely a speculation. What if Shane had actually won? Would WWE really have handed him on-screen control of Raw for an extended run? Or was that always a short-term storyline device, destined to be reversed within a few months, regardless of the match's outcome? WWE has a long history of authority figure storylines that get quietly walked back once they've served their purpose, so it's entirely possible a Shane win would have led to a similar creative reset a few months later anyway. We'll never know for certain, but it's a fair question to sit with. So what actually happened to Shane's career after WrestleMania 32? He didn't disappear completely, but he also didn't return immediately to weekly television. When he did come back, it was in the commissioner role on SmackDown, an authority position with real on-screen responsibility, but notably not the kind of company-wide power his return storyline had originally teased. Over the following years, Shane cycled through various authority roles and occasional in-ring appearances, remaining a recognizable part of WWE programming without ever again being positioned as a genuine threat to actually run the company on screen. Fast forward to Shane's final run with WWE before his 2022 departure, and it's hard not to see WrestleMania 32 as something of a ceiling that was never fully broken through afterward. He remained a familiar and generally well-liked presence in authority roles, occasionally stepping back into the ring for one-off matches, but the specific narrative this WrestleMania 32 match had introduced Shane as a genuine, potential power player battling for real control but never fully resurfaced. In the same way again, whether The Undertaker's win that night was the actual cause of that ceiling, or simply the first visible marker of a direction WWE had already decided on, is something reasonable fans can disagree about. It's also worth noting how this match fits into the broader arc of The Undertaker's own late-career WrestleMania run. Around this same period, he was working through a series of high-profile, physically demanding matches that pushed his body in ways rarely asked of performers his age. The Shane match added a different dimension to that stretch. Instead of facing another elite, in-ring competitor, he was effectively certifying, through the outcome of a single match, who was and wasn't ready to hold real power inside the company's own fictional hierarchy. It's a role few other performers in wrestling history have ever occupied quite so literally. So did The Undertaker end Shane McMahon's future in WWE that night, or did he actually help extend it by giving him one of the most memorable, respected performances of his entire on-screen run? There's no single correct answer here, and that's really the point. Shane's WrestleMania 32 performance stands as one of those rare wrestling moments where the loss and the legacy don't line up neatly, where losing the match might have cost him the storyline he wanted, while the way he lost may have earned him almost everything else. It's the kind of contradiction that tends to define the most memorable moments in this business, where what happens on paper and what actually gets remembered years later can be two very different things entirely. What do you think? Did Shane deserve a real shot at running WWE, or was this always destined to end exactly the way it did? Drop your take in the comments. And if you want more deep dives like this one, make sure you're subscribed